we got to talk. We got to talk about all of the stuff. The Haitians on vacation, the HOVs in Ohio. Mike Benz of the Foundation for Freedom Online joins us. Benz, it's amazing to me that people are saying, oh, it's not happening, when they're saying, oh, why are you making these claims? And I say, I'm not making these claims at all. I wasn't even talking about this until the people of the town spoke up and said, these are the things that they're living with on a daily basis. And, oh, gosh, no, the official reports aren't putting it out there. But this is what they have to. Oh, I'm sorry. Are we denying people's lived experience now? Ben, let's step back for a second. You know, I've been talking about, I guess, it seems like a punitive measures, right? Because this is apparently one of the most pro-Trump counties in all of America. We know Ohio went super hard for Trump. And so the importation of tens of thousands of Haitians there makes sense from a punitive angle. But I noticed a thread that you put up on X where you have a different take on it. Benz, what's going on? Why? What's the geopolitical purpose behind importing this many Haitians to Middle America?
Well, it obviously makes sense, as you mentioned, from the sort of Democrat voting perspective, in the sense that Democrats have a vested interest in changing the demographics of places like Ohio so that population groups with a higher propensity to vote Democrat turn that swing state blue, in the same way that California turned blue because of a similar process. And we know that Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and basically everyone in Democrat Party leadership is talking openly as we speak, even as recent as this week, about the plan to provide a pathway to citizenship to 11 million new and often illegal immigrants here. But one of the things I wanted to point out, and this is speculation as we're waiting for more details and how these people got here that the townspeople are complaining about. My ears perked up when I heard this story, because there's Springfield is very close to Columbus, Ohio. It's about a half-hour drive, and this is a very common tactic that is done by the blob, not just the Democrat Party, but also the Republican Party, the internationalist wing of it, especially the internationalist wing of it concerned about the Western Hemisphere, Latin America, South America, and the Caribbean. Because Columbus, Ohio played a very intriguing role in the blob's geopolitical activity in terms of transporting drugs, guns, running basically proxy war, black budget funding operations dating back to the 1980s. There was, if folks remember, Bill Clinton was the attorney general and then the governor of Arkansas during the Iran-Contra scandal of the 1980s, which was when Congress forbade U.S. government funds. A Democrat Congress forbade taxpayer funds from the Reagan administration, the Republican administration, using them to overthrow the government of Nicaragua, using paramilitary street violence and drug laundering operations is what this ended up turning into, in the sense that, so you had this split. The Democrats didn't want the government of Nicaragua to be overthrown. The Republican president did. So the Republicans orchestrated this to get around the congressional ban on dollars. They orchestrated essentially a black budget fund for the Nicaraguan Contras that started off in a place called Mena, Arkansas, which was under Bill Clinton's purview there in Arkansas as the Democrat governor of the state, where the CIA was flying drugs from Colombia to Mena, Arkansas, converting those drugs to cash, buying guns with the cash, and then sending the guns down to the CIA-backed proxy groups in Nicaragua. Now, when that operation got busted, when one of the pilots ended up getting shot down and it was discovered to the international community that the CIA was running this operation, the Mena, Arkansas operation shut down and it moved to Columbus, Ohio. And this same operation continued. And Columbus, Ohio has this connection to Chicago. Chicago, there's the mafia, this sort of overworld, underworld connection between Pentagon and CIA protected black market rings in order to provide top-up funding for blob regime change operations, works with this criminal underworld. And, since the time of the Ohio mob moving to Chicago, Chicago is also the main through point for drugs coming up from the southern border. When there's literally a transportation route. I published this on my X account that goes straight from the Arizona border with the Sinaloa cartel straight to Chicago, and Chicago is the main clearinghouse. It's one of the reasons there's so much gang violence in Chicago, is because it is the sort of central warehouse for drug importation into the country. Now, Haitians have played a very interesting role in terms of the drug gangs there with American intelligence activity for many decades now, because often these Haitian gangs serve as drug mule middlemen for these operations, as they did in Iran-Contra, as they did in several other ones during what was known as Operation Condor from the 1960s through the 1980s. And so, given what's happening in Haiti now, if you recall, just a few months ago, a former FBI agent, a former DEA agent, and several people trained by the U.S. military went into the president's home in Haiti and assassinated him in cold blood, triggering this mass unrest in Haiti and triggering a predicate for U.S. intervention. Now, what's amazing is we're not able to get more details about that because the murder trial, which is happening in Miami, the CIA intervened and said that the evidence can't be disclosed publicly or even to the defense attorneys in the case, because it would undermine U.S. national security if Americans knew what the CIA was up to in Haiti. Now, my concern is, with all of the turbulence happening in South America right now and the need to continue to pump up these proxy groups for the blob, I wonder if Haitians are being imported right back to the site of Southern Air Transport. This is where Southern Air Transport was called Spook Air, because it was a proprietary CIA airline that went straight from South America to Columbus, Ohio. And when I see mass Haitians being imported at a time when the geopolitics of Haiti in terms of our foreign policy on Cuba, our foreign policy on Colombia, our foreign policy on El Salvador, and all the other South American countries right now, where there's a delicate tango dance in order to preserve geopolitical control over them. I wonder if there is something similar being set up, and if you start to see drug flows around Ohio and nobody getting arrested, the gang leaders not getting arrested, I wonder if there's something else going on here. And what I'll say, just to your point about Trump country, is understand this was a Republican thing in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and when all these declassifications came, because there were public hearings that the Democrats held on this. If you start to see Republicans in Ohio connected to the military or connected to statecraft or connected to intelligence telling other Republicans, pipe down, stop complaining about this, well, that might give you the answer why.
Well, and Benz, as well, you mentioned a bunch about Southern Air. Think about what we have today on the ground. So Air Mobility Command, many of these commands currently sit directly on, I have the list in front of me a second, Air Force Material Command, Air Force Research Laboratory, the 88th Air Base Wing. All of these are located right on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And what is directly down the road from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is Springfield, Ohio. It is the very next town over, and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is directly between. It's one of the largest employers in that part of Ohio. The intelligence agencies maintain a presence there. It's also, by the way, where the Air Force's Institute of Technology is, the Air Force Office of Scientific Research, the Defense Acquisition University. So, and when you're talking about acquisition, you're talking about foreign materials. You're talking about all sorts of, again, as you mentioned, these spooky operations that are taken down through there. And so there's no question in my mind that this is existing. It's kind of like how, the Wuhan virus came out right down the street from the Wuhan lab. And suddenly people said, you think we should ask some questions about that virology institute down the road, folks? So yes, we are going to be asking questions about the bedrock of this area, the same way that Benz is talking. Folks, this is why the SAVE Act needs to be included in the CR. SAVE Act or shut it down. You can't have a government that's importing tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of non-citizens into our country. And at the same time that they are saying that we are not going to put forward legislation to prevent them from voting. I'm sorry, you don't get to have it both ways, Kamala. You don't get to have it this way. So Speaker Johnson and all the other guys up there, grow a spine. Now is the time to execute the shaping operation using the forcing function of the September 30th cutoff date. That deadline for the budget. This is how we get it all forward. Mike Benz, I got to ask you, all the data points I just dropped there with the, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, the intelligence agencies maintaining a footprint there, connect the dots for us in a way that I could see the gears moving.
Well, I mean, that perfectly explains it because, I said the word CIA, in our first segment many times because the CIA was the sort of technical back channel liaison for these street drug networks and the coca cultivation networks for the cocaine in Peru and Bolivia that would then be basically transported by unions that were penetrated by our intelligence services to Colombia, where the military was working with the Colombian cartels. They would process the coca into cocaine there. They would then fly it into Mena, Arkansas. When Mena, Arkansas shut down, it moved to Columbus, Ohio. Southern Air Transport did, which was, the Spook Air, the CIA airline. And the fact is this is a military operation. We have the purpose of refugee programs is primarily to capacity build networks that can liaise with the territory that we are trying to achieve some political operation or some covert operation or some destabilization operation in. So when we bring refugees from Somalia to the United States, that's not just a sort of demographic, replacement or vote rigging type operation. Many times that will have Republican support, not because they want these people as low-skill labor. That is another issue with Republicans. You mentioned the SAVE Act and this sort of thing. Republican Chamber of Commerce companies do have a vested interest in open borders for cheap labor, but this is something a little bit different for refugee programs rather than economic migrants. Refugees are often gang leaders or political dissidents or people who are being prosecuted by their country's police or law enforcement or intelligence services or political apparatus. And so they are brought to the United States to keep them safe so that their networks can be preserved, so that they can continue to have basically safe communications, free from the threat of being arrested by their own government. And so we often import those gang leaders, those warlords, those deeply politically connected dissidents into American cities, like Miami is a very frequent one, or Caribbean and South American activities that the DOD or CIA are up to. Houston, Texas is another big one for folks in Latin America. And wherever you have the hub set up is usually the place where these people are flown to. For example, if it's military, these refugees will often be flown to places near a military base. This is one of the reasons there's such a big importation of refugees into places like Colorado, which have a huge number of special operations centers as well as military. And so it's not just putting them into pockets to displace Trump voters. Oftentimes they're being brought in and their network is being brought in so that they can continue to be effective, they can be protected, and they can be capacity built. It's easier for them to be trained. It's easier to have private conversations with military officials. It's easier to put money in their bank account and not have to go through a Byzantine structure of Cayman Islands offshore accounts to get it done. And so my concern is when you tell me that in addition to the facts that I laid out, that there's a whole spider web of military infrastructure, basically right on the way from the airport to exactly where these people were dumped. Well, given what I just laid out about how we just, how a former FBI agent, former DEA agent, and several people trained personally by the U.S. military assassinated Haiti's president, and now basically as we're doing the reconstruction, there is this big turf war among all the gangs for which one will rise to power. Well,
wait, Benz, did you just say that the intelligence community is involved in assassinations? There's no way that the national security agencies would ever use assassinations against world leaders or potential political leaders, potential, I don't know, presidents, maybe even former presidents. They would never do such a thing on domestic soil, though, right?
Oh, no, never. You know what's so funny is a few weeks ago on one of my subscriber streams, I actually read out the CIA assassination manual from the 1970s that ended up getting declassified in the late 1990s. And so, this is like the official CIA instruction manual for how to kill someone and get away with it. And one of the things that they laid out there, since you mentioned the Wuhan lab in the previous segment, is one of the things they laid out is one of the best methods to do so is to have the target meet you in a building with a ledge or a window that is larger, that is taller than 7.5 stories, 7.5 stories or taller, and have a hard surface below. That way, it's you can argue the person just accidentally fell out of it or maybe committed suicide, and the body will be so scrambled upon impact that it's very difficult for digital forensics to detect it. Well, if you remember, there was actually a scientist involved in the whole bat lady corona world who was a whistleblower for about 2 weeks right after the 2019 outbreak. But then that person unfortunately threw himself off of the top story of the Wuhan lab. Well, guess how many stories the Wuhan lab is? It's 8 stories.
8 stories.
It perfectly matches the CIA assassination guy.
I've always been a little skeptical when they say that, someone was taken out by, one of these really exotic, radioactive isotope and plutonium and selenium and all these different things. Like, it sounds like really hard to deal with. And how do you transport it? And, how do you make sure it doesn't hurt yourself? But you know what a real assassination is? You just throw the guy out the window. Whoops. Whoops. It looks like he slipped, and turned into a pancake. That's how and oh, by the way, 2 behind the ear. Yeah, that's not. I don't know. I don't get what the operational necessity, or honestly, it seems like something that would lead to operational failure if you're using some kind of exotic method.
Right. Well, strangely, when the Russians, as we're told, try all these exotic techniques, they don't seem to work. If folks remember the Skripal poisoning of the MI6 agents in the UK in 2017.
Who were the? Oh, by the way, you just tied it back for me, because what was the only living creature that died in that entire affair?
What was it?
It was his cat. His cat was Skripal's cat was the only one who died because the British agents locked up the house and didn't feed it. So we got dead cats in Ohio. Now we got dead cats all the way up in Skripal. It's all tied together, folks. They're coming for the cats. They're coming for the cats. We figured it out.
It's like Dumb and Dumber, when the guys go in and they kill Petey. It's just like
when they kill Petey.
It's like they're sending a message.
Pretty bird.
They're sending a message taking the cats. But then, if you remember, Navalny also. Navalny
they call us the gas man. How they know I got gas?
Right. Exactly. But if you remember, Alexei Navalny, Bellingcat, who the CIA said we love Bellingcat, and who these, it's funded directly by the National Endowment for Democracy, the largest CIA cutout. But if you remember, they prank called a Russian and got a random Russian person on an unsecured line to confess that they did I call it the Navalny Novichok nutsack poisoning, right? They poisoned his underwear with Novichok. Yep. That's the official story now. And yet, he survived that as well. So, as you said, dropping him out the window is, the CIA assassination.
It's a few time-honored ways to do this. Producer Faz was saying, just wait, guys, talk about the debate. Guys, there's other stuff going on. I said, never. And he finally is like, yeah, never mind. This is great. The Assassination Hour with Poso and Benz.